George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. We remember this morning Marjorie Carter, educator in the Syracuse City School District, the first black Syracuse teacher, taught there for nearly 40 years. She died at the age of 97. Her many honors include being the Syracuse Post Standard Woman of Achievement, the 2021 Women of Distinction in New York State, the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Century Club, the SUNY Cortland Distinguished Alumni Award, the Association of Black Educators Distinguished Service Award, and a scholarship in her name given annually at SUNY Cortland. She served the community in a number of different capacities. She was a member of the Syracuse chapter of the Business and Women's Professional Clubs, Syracuse Interfaith Works Senior Service Program, the SUNY Cortland Alumni Award, the Syracuse University International Center, a board member of OASIS of Central New York, and past president of the Syracuse chapter of the Links Incorporated. And it's interesting because I remember her. I was part of the Men Who Cook, sponsored by the Syracuse Links, a portion of the proceeds where they used to raise scholarship money. And I remember her always coming around with the little tablespoon, which is the amount of the serving we were supposed to give folk who came to sample our food. Here's a conversation we had talking about being just that, the first black teacher in the Syracuse City School District, remembering Marjorie Carter. Inspiration for the Nation at its best. Marjorie Carter, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Well, a little bit about you. You're the first African-American teacher in the city of Syracuse. You went to Charles Andrews Elementary School on Salt Springs Road. Of course, that is now the Salt Springs Apartments or whatever it's called. You went to SUNY Cortland, and you were the only black student on Cortland's campus for most of the time that you were there. You received numerous awards, and it's our honor to present the Black History Month Legacy Series honoring you and your experience here in the Syracuse City School District. So, Marjorie, first of all, how many years young are you right now?
I'm 93.
93? And you told me the other day that you drove yourself back and forth to SUNY Cortland as part of your experience as part of the Diversity Advisory Council. God bless you, sister, because I know a lot of people that would not do it.
Oh, that's an easy drive. Just got 881 and down you go.
Down you go. So tell me, what does it feel like to you? You've been honored. You've had these conversations for many times, but one of the things we want to do is get the background of you, a little bit about you. What was it like for you growing up in Syracuse at the time? And in 1950, when you graduated from SUNY Cortland and you became the first black teacher in Syracuse, why weren't there any teachers before you?
You have to remember that this was 1950. This was before Martin Luther King. This was before anyone that you can think of that was working with or doing anything with integration at that point for women and women of color both. And most of the high school females in my class just were interested in getting married. Also, remember this was the back end of a war and, all of those kinds of things. So I contribute it to that. I have seen some of my classmates from that year, those that are alive, and they got married and had families. But I had a dream, and I've just gone on with my dream. just like Martin Luther King.
And I want people to have the context for which you came into the Syracuse City School District. This was before Brown versus Board of Education. This is before the Civil Rights Movement. This is before the March on Washington. This is before the Little Rock Nine. All of this is before all of those historical markers, before Emmett Till, before all of those historical markers in our nation's history. Here you are integrating. So what was that like for you, the first black teacher? Was it a big deal at the time, or was it just, well, here I am and here I go?
Well, it was more like, well, here I am and here I go. I was hired almost immediately to, and when I say immediately, because two people from the district, the assistant superintendent and somebody else, came down to Cortland to recruit people to come to Syracuse to teach. And I was one of the ones. There were only two of us, my roommate and I. Anyways, got there, got the interview, and I was hired right then. And when I got here, there was an article in the paper. In fact, I happen to have a copy of that. It's staring at me at this point, but that's all there was. Just first Negro teacher.
Yeah, Negro.
We weren't even black at that point. We were Negro teachers.
As a matter of fact,
Negro.
And as a matter of fact, you didn't even.
I had no problem at all. My kids didn't ever mention the fact that they had a teacher that was a different color. Parents only knew that when they came to school for open house, and they came in and said, "Oh, didn't know you were a black teacher." My kids never said anything. So that's how it was. I was very well accepted by the teachers in the school, all of whom must have been, 10, 15, 20 years older than me. I was the youngest one in the building, but had no problems.
Well, interesting, right? And yet at the same time, you weren't in any black schools, which is kind of interesting, right? I mean, you didn't teach black students. Why was that? That didn't make any sense to me. What was up with that?
Well, black studies was not even thought about at that point. You have to keep thinking about the year. You have to think that this was before integration or anyone was even using the word integration.
So my question was more.
None of that was there.
My question was, why didn't you get placed in the black school?
There wasn't a black school.
So no, I guess what I mean by black school.
Really?
Where most of the black students were before desegregation. Why didn't they place you in a school like Madison Irving or Croton or is it Madison or Washington Irving? Or why didn't they place you in a school or like that?
Because there was an opening at Charles Andrews and not at Washington Irving. Madison was where I went to school, and at that point they were neighborhood schools, so there weren't that many black students in that school to begin with.
So why did you want to teach in the first place?
Because I had a teacher who just inspired me.
Who inspired you?
And she inspired me, and I thought, oh, that's what I want to do. And I told my parents, and they did not say, no, you can't do that. They were just very silent. I think they knew they had a problem.
We're talking with Marjorie Carter, first African-American teacher in the city of Syracuse. So where did you grow up in town?
On the east side of the city. Madison is now a residential apartment.
A condo, right, condos.
And I went there from kindergarten through 8th grade, and then I went to Central High School. There was no Central Tech at that point. and no reason to be either. Well, there was a reason, but it wasn't. But I attended Central, and then from Central I went to Cortland.
Do you have other family? Do you have other siblings as well?
Nope, I don't have brothers and sisters at all. And my parents said they could not have another child like me, so they didn't have any more kids.
Were your parents educators?
My parents went to high school, graduated from high school, wherever they were, and my father was born in Navarino, which is a little town on Route 20 between Lafayette and Skaneateles. If you blink your eyes, you've passed it. And my mother was from Virginia, but she met my father, and that was that.
Now, when you got hired, who was the superintendent at the time?
Oh, gee, I can't remember his name.
Because I know that when the schools were desegregated, Franklin Barry was the superintendent who oversaw the desegregations of schools. But you don't know whether he was the superintendent when
No, he was not the superintendent. I met Franklin Barry many times because I was involved in a lot of organizations, even after I became hired. And I met him several times, but no, I cannot remember the name. I'll have to go through my records because it's the second time recently that I've been asked that question, and I don't remember. All I remember was that he said to me when I had an interview with him, the superintendent at that time, that what about a first grade? And I said, never should a new teacher teach first grade. It is the most important grade in the whole system, and you need someone with experience. Guess what grade I started with?
First grade.
Yeah.
So you credit a teacher with inspiring you to be a teacher, and she had a saying for you, and it has to do with a flower. Tell me about this flower, the trillium.
Tell me about the what of the children?
The trillium. What is the trillium to you? It's a rare flower.
Well, trillium is a flower.
Right, and
she was doing a nature lesson and had picked a trillium out of her yard. She lived in Tully and brought it to school, and she was telling us about it, and I just was very fascinated with learning. Maybe I should have been in science rather than teaching first grade. But she, that just was, it just hit something with me and made me think, I want to do that. I want to be able to pass on to other children all of this knowledge. And continuing knowledge, yes. That's what I did.
Was she your favorite teacher, and was that your favorite subject?
This was sixth grade, and at that point it was a part of the curriculum,
right,
of the regular teaching curriculum, and so you just, taught whatever. And, of course, she was one who brought little extra things into her classroom, and that's what got me started.
And so, but did you have a favorite teacher growing up?
No, all of them were my favorites.
What I'm finding fascinating about you is that you integrated the school district and you had no issues, yet it was a district that was not necessarily tolerant because let's talk about moving through desegregation of the schools. And when you went to Charles Andrews Elementary School, it had not been desegregated. So how did you view this opportunity?
Well, it wasn't even even desegregated because in the neighborhood that Charles Andrews was in, there were very few blacks anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Any black children, because I think I had been teaching maybe 4 years before I had my first black child in my room, and he was from Elmcrest Children's Center.
And so when you look at that experience, what was it like going through the desegregation process in the city? Because a lot of the white parents fought it. They didn't want it. And the impact was mainly on black families. You had a number of organizations, CORE, NAACP,
right,
the Syracuse Coalition for Integrated Education. You had all of these groups coming together, and the white families didn't have to do anything. But the black students had to be the ones to move, and they were concerned about, the black parents were concerned about why that burden was placed on them. What do you recall about the transition of desegregating the Syracuse City Schools and all of that? And this is around the year, this is what, 1963 or around that time?
Well, about that time I was, let me see, I'm trying to think whether I was still in the classroom or whether I had been, was in a special program. And I think possibly in the 60s, it may have been 60s, 70s, there was a special special projects came into being, and it was a program that was financed by the government.
I believe it was called the Madison Improvement Project or something like that.
Well, it was even before that. There was a title for it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Special Projects was all over. What they were doing with that program was working within the schools. Danforth, which was down on Kennedy, and I think it's got a new name now, but Danforth School and Croton, a couple of the Roosevelt was a junior high school, and it has a new name at this point. And all of those were a part of it, and there were special programs within those schools to help the students in that schools. It was a different curriculum for them. They had the curriculum for the city and state, but there were also some special programs that were going on at that point. And they were, it was able to get other funding, and that's why Special Projects came into being.
So when you think,
I don't know if I've answered your question or not.
It was about what did you observe or recall about the transition of bringing more black students into the classrooms with white students? What did you notice about that? Because some of the documentation about that was that it was tough for a lot of the black students in particular because they closed a couple of the predominantly black schools in the community to achieve some of this racial balance. And some of the black students found, some of the resistance, but then they did a study, and the study showed that there was some improvement in achievement, which the black parents were like, well, that's fun, that's fine, but why wasn't that same effort given to the neighborhood schools? In other words, did you observe any inequality of resources? What kinds of things did you observe around that transition, or did you think it was smooth?
It seemed to be smooth. I mean, from where I was, it seemed to be smooth. I went into, I worked with teachers at Croton, which later became Dr. King, but it was Croton when I was there, among other things. By the way, there was recruitment going on, and I think he was the first. Felton Sales, Sr., was the first principal. And he was the first principal of Croton, but he was also the first black principal. he had been a vice principal at Groton, and when that principal left, he became. They just moved Felton up, and he became the principal of that school. So he was the first, and there were some others. And there was recruitment going on outside the city to get black educators to come to be hired or to come, even want to come. I went on one of the recruitment trips and to the south, and the biggest thing was the weather, if you can imagine.
They didn't want to come up here.
And today it's 8 degrees, so that kind of gives you most of them didn't want to because of the weather, and said to me, personally, that was why they weren't coming. At least that's what they said. If they had other reasons, I don't know. But those that did come, many of them stayed here. Many of them moved on to become administrators or left the district to take administrative positions in other school districts. So, that was that kind of thing. And also, you're talking about one of the things that happened about that time was the schools there was some redistricting done because 81 had come through, and we know what happened with all of that.
We know what happened with all of that.
Yeah.
So
as a result, children went to schools that they had not been in before because of where they lived. Schools were set up according to where you lived. You had neighborhood schools, and but since we lost a couple of neighborhood schools, they had to go someplace else because they were also living someplace else. And as a result, all of those other problems came to being or didn't come to be. There was no problem at the school I was in. I was at Charles Andrews. It was predominantly white, but we also had let's see, I'm trying to remember because the facility has had various names. The apartments down on Fayette Street went from being predominantly white to be predominantly black because many of the people that had lived in the area that was cut off or was no longer in existence, they found themselves to be at another school.
So what about Marjorie, the achievement gap, which came into term that term came into existence in the 50s as a result of Brown versus Board of Education. Did you notice anything around achievement gap? Some of the research suggests that the desegregation led to improved scores for some of the young people when they integrated the schools. Is that your experience as well, or do you have any recollection of anything related to achievement gap?
Not even a recollection, because the school where I was, it just didn't exist. We were so far on the east side.
Right.
Remember, Charles Andrews School is just down the street from Lemoyne College.
Right. So that's right.
Which was not in existence when I started teaching. which is
the apartments. So what do you think, looking at education today, what reforms do you think? You went on to be an instructional, you were part of the instructional design. You were part of opening up Dr. Weeks School when it first opened up. What reforms do you think education needs to have now?
I think there's all kinds of things. We're doing things according to state regulations, which is fine, and we do need to have something that is common to all schools wherever they are. But I also think that there needs to be some special classes, or there needs to be some special, not classes, but instruction, because we're now talking about kids who are not getting at home what kids were getting at home when I started teaching.
So back to us taking care and being the primary educators.
Has to do with the fact that mothers are now, and I have nothing against mothers going, teaching, working, and because they need to do that. But our curriculum, our system needs to reflect and think about that. Parents are not home, and I'm not giving that as a complaint. So don't anybody call the radio station and say, well, she's terrible.
No, but there's other ways that we can get that information.
That we have to be realistic, and we have to think those things that mothers were doing, they're no longer able to do because they're off working, and they need to work.
And so we got to,
for a lot of reasons.
Well, and we should be, but there's other programs that we can get kids into. But what I'm hearing you say is that we have to get back to basics, being the primary educators of our children. We've said it before, and we said it again. We cannot leave the education of our children. We have to take responsibility for that and have some of that in the time that we have with our kids. We don't have as much time as we used to have, so there's extracurricular activities and extra programs.
Right.
Let me ask you lastly, what do you want your legacy to be, and what's your message to the current and next generation of educators? First, what do you want your legacy to be?
To the present group of anybody that's in school, I think that parents are going to have to take time to either sit down with kids or read to kids before they go to bed. I know that the mothers and fathers are busy, but even if you read to them or read with them for 5-10 minutes every day or every other day, that would be a help, because that makes the family closer together. And if the family's closer together, you're going to have a better child ready for school, because they are being all the way around. They're getting nurtured, and I think that that's one of the things that we need to do. I was either read to, or I did after I got up as an age. I was doing a lot of reading, and I still do a lot of reading. But my basic things are that if you have a dream, follow it. And don't let anybody tell you, well, you can't do that because you are the wrong color or the wrong size or the wrong whatever, because you're not. You have to have your own. Every child needs to have their own dreams, and they need to pursue them. And you're not going to start at the top of the stairs with anything.
Remembering Syracuse's first black teacher, the first black teacher, Marjorie Carter, who passed away at the age of 97. Services and calling hours will be held tomorrow, May the 6th, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the University United Methodist Church, 1085 East Genesee Street in Syracuse, with services to follow at 1 p.m. Reverend Alicia Wood officiating. Parking for the church is at 324 University Avenue, with the interment at the Highland Cemetery on New Seneca Turnpike in Marcellus. Contributions can be made to the Salvation Army Women's and Children Services, 677 South Salina Street in Syracuse, or the Syracuse chapter of Links Incorporated Scholarship Fund, care of Post Office Box 345, Syracuse, New York, 13214. Once again, the Syracuse chapter of Links Incorporated Scholarship Fund, care of P.O. Box 345, Syracuse, New York, 13214. Marjorie Day Carter, Inspiration for the Nation, people that we feel good about. Someone we admire. Inspiration for the Nation.